Hey, welcome to Nintendocade. I am Danny. Today I'm going to be showing you some of the accessories, specifically the official accessories for the Nintendo Switch Original, the one that we had for a very long time. That as a question, I had a question and I thought you guys would be interested. Which of the official Nintendo Switch accessories work for the Nintendo Switch 2? As we transition to the new generation, we want to keep our old stuff and see what works for the new stuff, right? That is an important factor because we're going to be playing extended for various games and we want to keep what we have. So I'm going to go through various accessories and hopefully you found this informative. If you do find it informative, I do appreciate a thumbs up. Consider subscribing for more helpful information like this in the future. All right, let's get into it. All right, starting with the classic Joy-Con controllers. I think everyone have this by now. The good news is it is compatible with the Nintendo Switch 2, but it only can be used wirelessly. And if you probably know by now, the Nintendo Switch 2 doesn't use a rail system to slide onto the main console. It has this magnetic attachment, so you don't slide again. With that in mind, you cannot play in handheld mode. You can only work with TV mode and also in tabletop mode. So those are limiting factors, but the good news is you could probably more likely play Mario Kart World when you sync the controllers onto that new system. So you're good to go with that. Next, we have the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, a classic one that Evan and I use it quite often on our gameplay. It's very very comfortable. And good news again, it is compatible with the Nintendo Switch 2. This one you could charge. They do have USB ports on the dock, the new Nintendo Switch 2 dock, so you can use that to charge it and continue your play as you normally would with your Nintendo Switch 2. All right, here's a little bit different. This is the Nintendo Entertainment System controller, or another way of saying is the NES controller. It does use the rail system, so unfortunately this one you cannot slide onto the Nintendo Switch 2, just like the Joy-Cons, but it is usable on the new system. It does work with the compatible games, again, on the Nintendo Switch Online service. So obviously playing those classic Super Mario Brothers and so forth, those NES games, is good to go for here. All right, so here is another one of my favorite controllers. That is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System controller, or SNES controller. It is working with the Nintendo Switch 2, so you're good to go with that. So you can play the compatible games and you can charge it with a via USB cable on the dock on Nintendo Switch 2. So there you go. This is one of the quirky controllers. That is the Nintendo 64 controller. Good news is it is compatible. As you see by now, a lot of these controls are compatible. The ones that are the retro ones are adapted to Nintendo Switch. You can use it to Nintendo Switch 2, no problems. Same thing, you can use the USB cable connected to the dock and charge it and play with the compatible games with it. This is a little different. It's not Nintendo, but there is one made for Nintendo Switch. That is the Sega Genesis control pad. Same thing again. You can play compatible games pairing it wirelessly, and you can use the USB cable to charge it with the new Nintendo Switch 2 dock. This one, some of you guys have it, maybe you don't have it, but in case you do have it, this one is not compatible because obviously it is used for charging the Nintendo Switch system, the original one. The voltage, or I should say, maybe more likely the wattage of the charging stand here is not compatible because the new system does need more power to juice it up. So that's why they just say straight out, probably don't want to use it with it. Okay, so this is kind of might be a gray area, but I think this one clears it up. This is the Nintendo Switch dock, because the Nintendo Switch 2 dock looks kind of similar, little rounded edges and everything like that, but it's definitely not compatible. So you don't want to dock your Nintendo Switch 2 in the original one. Couple of things, maybe the grooves are a little different. The obviously when you use the power, it's not compatible because it does, again, like the previous accessory, it does need more juice to power the system, so you don't want to do that, so just don't do it. Here is an interesting one. Now you're wondering, does it work? Yes and no. So what I mean by that, you don't want to use the dock that you saw earlier with this AC adapter. Again, the Nintendo Switch 2 does require a higher power capability from an AC adapter, so you definitely want to use the one that is included for Nintendo Switch 2. I mean, you already have it in the box, so why not, right? Interesting thing is, if you use this adapter, you can connect it directly to the Nintendo Switch 2 and charge it. So that's the only usage for it, but you cannot use it in any other way for Nintendo Switch 2. You can use it to directly connect it to Nintendo Switch 2, but not through the dock, but just through the system itself. That's it. Here's something that many people do not think. Not all HDMI cables are the same. This is really applies to this because the original Nintendo Switch gave you an older standard HDMI cable. With the new system has much more capabilities like HDR, VRR, 120 frames per second, up to 120 frames per second to be more precise. So if you want to take advantage of those capabilities, you definitely want to use the one that was included for Nintendo Switch 2. You can actually use the Nintendo Switch 2 HDMI cable with your old system, but you shouldn't use the old Nintendo Switch HDMI cable for the Nintendo Switch 2. They're interchangeable, but if you want the full capabilities, you definitely want to use the newer cable that came with Nintendo Switch 2 to use all those nice features that you bought the system for. So over the years, you probably have tons of micro SD cards that you accumulate for your original Nintendo Switch. You know, you download a lot of games or you have a lot of saves for different games and stuff like that. And you're like, can I use the original micro SD cards? Unfortunately, you cannot. The new Nintendo Switch 2 does use a new standard. It's called the Micro SD Express cards. Now, I want to express this very carefully. It says Micro SD Express. That is the new standard. It does have higher speed capabilities. So, you think about the faster loading times and you want to transfer from the micro SD cards to the system itself. You need that high speed. That's one example. So definitely you want to buy new micro SD card, which is Micro SD Express, when you get the system. Okay, so this is a little quirky one. If you play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, you probably use this one, or even way back when you got the Wii U, they did have a Nintendo GameCube controller adapter. Good news is it works perfectly fine. The Nintendo Switch 2 dock does have USB Type A ports on the side, so you're good to go plugging that in. And if you have wired game controllers, you could just play whatever game that's supported down the line. All right, so this is, I think it's self-explanatory at this point. It does, the Nintendo Switch 2 doesn't have a rail system, so the Joy-Con straps, the original one, is not compatible. So there you go. We'll move on from there. Once again, this is the Joy-Con grip. It does not use a rail system, so obviously Joy-Con 2 for the Nintendo Switch 2 does not work. You can use it to, with the original Joy-Cons from the original Nintendo Switch, and use that setup for Nintendo Switch 2 when you sync it wirelessly. But obviously you cannot use the new Joy-Cons in this Joy-Con grip. Here's another one, same thing. This has the Joy-Con charging grip. No rail system for the new controller. So, you could still use it for the original Joy-Cons. Juice up your original controllers and use it that way for Nintendo Switch 2. But other than that, it's not compatible for the new controllers. Here's something out of the ordinary. This is the Joy-Con wheel. This is definitely not compatible. If you notice that there are, obviously the rail system is different, so the shape is obviously not the same as the imprint for this Joy-Con wheel, so it would not work. Definitely we'll leave this out for the Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con controllers. Ring Fit Adventure. So this is the leg strap that was included with it. You cannot use Joy-Con 2 controllers with this leg strap. You would have to use the original Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. The game should work, so you would use the original Joy-Con and that should work fine. So you're good to go with that, but definitely no Joy-Con 2 controllers working with the leg strap. And talk about the leg strap from Ring Fit Adventure, you got the Ring-Con. Again, Joy-Con 2 controllers do not work, and you do need to use the original Joy-Cons for that game to work for the Nintendo Switch 2. But you can use the game on the new system, but you cannot use the new controllers with this game. All right, something unusual. These are the Joy-Con AA battery pack pair. Again, this is something not everyone has, but in case you do, this is not compatible because it does have those size differences from the new Joy-Cons from this original old Joy-Con that we had for many years. So definitely not go for this one. So if you like charging your Joy-Cons with something like of this accessory, this is the Joy-Con charging stand, two-way. There is no railing system. This is kind of self-explanatory at this point. It does not work for Joy-Con 2 controllers. Maybe Nintendo down the line will, release an updated one that worked with the magnetic class system, but this one definitely is not compatible. All right, so I hope you guys enjoy my overview of the various official Nintendo Switch accessories, the original Nintendo Switch accessories that will work or don't work with Nintendo Switch 2. That way, you know what to get into, what you can use, or what you keep with the old system as you transition to the new generation. Of course, if you find this guide helpful, I would do appreciate a thumbs up. Consider subscribing for more videos like this down the line, and let us know you like this kind of stuff. Leave it down below in the comments. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. As always, I'm Dan Nintendo K Channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.